Good afternoon, Grade 11, and welcome to this broadcast of Homeostasis today. I'm Colin Oppold from New Orleans Secondary in Paarl, and allow us to my co-presenter here to introduce herself.
Hello, Grade 11. So I'm Lorraine Keane. I'm a teacher at Huguenot High School in Wellington, and the two of us have an interesting topic for you. Now, the topic that we're going to discuss is homeostasis, and it does not occur as such in your grade 11 textbook, but it's a concept that you will see when we work on it now, that you've done most of the work already, and it's also a topic that you need to focus on because it will also help you with your work for next year when you're in grade 12. And welcome to Zukanye and Inyati High Schools, and the rest of you, please ask questions if you have.
Yes, thank you, Lorraine. And we will jump off when we say, what is it that you need to know on homeostasis? And first of all, what is a negative feedback mechanism? It's a long word, and it is not that difficult. If you follow what we say, you'll get to understand it very easily.
Yeah, and maybe, yes, there's you've got insulin and glucagon, and they've already done that and talked about it when they did nutrition, human nutrition, and where they discussed the role of insulin and glucagon.
Then we have the control of the carbon dioxide, that is the breathing rate and the levels of carbon dioxide and of course oxygen in the body, and that is when you do the chapter on breathing.
Yeah, and I think most of them have done that too.
And then the water and salt content of the body, negative feedback mechanism to keep the water and salt content in your body constant. And this is what homeostasis is all about.
And before we get to that, the water and salt, if they haven't done it yet, they will do it when they do excretion in humans. In other words, the role of the kidneys. So yes, grade 11s, we hope you understand now. And as Colin has said, when we talk about homeostasis, what does it mean?
There you can see the Greek for homeo means constant, and stasis is also a word that you will learn next year in grade 12, means to be stable. So it's remaining stable or remaining the same and keeping something constant.
Yes, the Americans talk about, in some of their textbooks, you will find the term steady state. And I usually find that very descriptive. In other words, conditions, and we'll sort of expand on that, must remain more or less the same. Steady, in other words. And Colin, you've got a definition there.
Oh yeah, very important that they do remember the definition and know this, because the process is about maintaining a constant internal environment, despite changes that take place internally or externally. Now, to talk about that maintaining a constant internal environment, we need to ask yourself, what is an internal environment? And your internal environment is normally being determined by your tissue fluid in your body that flows through your body. And
can we just make sure about what the tissue fluid is? I think you might remember in grade 10 you learned about blood and the liquid part of blood plasma. You also learned about the lymphatic system and lymph. Now, when blood, the capillary blood vessels bring nutrients, oxygen, whatever organ we're busy with towards the organ, some of the blood plasma will leak out of the capillaries. And now they surround cells, and that is blood plasma. So it's actually the same thing. It is just now in another place. And as this tissue fluid is drained by the lymphatic system, it becomes lymph. But it does mean that each and every cell in your body is surrounded by a thin layer of fluid or liquid called the blood plasma, with more or less the same the tissue fluid, with more or less the same consistency as blood plasma and lymphatic fluid or lymph.
Right, there's all this, actually, if you look at the origin of it, it all comes from the blood. So that's important to know, and depending on the where you find it, it gets a name from there.
All the constituents the same, yes.
But it's also about maintaining an internal or constant internal environment despite changes in your external environment. There we can give a very simple example of your body temperature. Now, we all maintain a normal body temperature in a constant one of 37 degrees, actually 36.9, but let's talk about 37 degrees. So today out here it's about 23 degrees here in Stellenbosch, and some places it might be 18, some places it might be 40 degrees. So it doesn't matter what the external temperature is, your body is constantly going to try and maintain a constant temperature of 37 degrees. And those adaptations that your body make to maintain that constant level, that is what we call what is homeostasis.
And it's interesting that even if it's very cold or very hot, your core temperature up to a certain point will remain the same. So yes, that is part that we will do specifically again in matric. But let's see. Yeah, it's important what you're saying there, Colin.
Oh, it's maintaining your internal stability, but also returning to a particular stable. So if any change should take place, it has to return to a particular stable state after any fluctuation. And when we talk about a fluctuation, it can be either anything above normal or anything below normal. That is fluctuating around normal. And in humans, it is maintained within this normal range. And that is called a negative feedback mechanism.
In other words, we should all be in a Goldilocks state. In other words, porridge shouldn't be too warm or too cold. Things shouldn't be too high, too low, too much, too little, just right. Which does not necessarily mean it's all the same. Various factors have different normals. Okay, so let's get back to negative feedback, because negative feedback is the way that all the conditions or factors in the internal environment are controlled by.
Yeah, and this is exactly what we're looking at, and I'm going to give you a much more simpler way. So we're going to look at it. If we can just go back to this one.
Yeah.
We look at negative feedback mechanism. It is that system within the body. Thank you. It's a system inside the body where there's a normal range. Anything can happen that something can go below normal range, and then there is a correcting mechanism that must take that below normal and push it back to the normal state. Then something can happen, let's leave stress. We can say that anything can happen that it goes above the normal state, and another correcting mechanism has come into play to return it to the normal state. And normal is normally referred to as the optimum. So 37 degrees Celsius in your body is optimum body temperature. We get optimum of all other things, and we're going to look at, oh my word, sorry.
Oh, dear
Okay,
Colin, there we are back.
Yes, there. Here we have. So let's look at what happens when an imbalance occurs, Lorraine.
Well, let's just make sure one thing. I have a question here from somebody who asks if we could keep the slides. Please do not try to write everything down. It is more important that you listen and focus and understand. You do have the notes. If you don't, you can go onto YouTube. It will also be loaded onto the various portals that's connected to telematics. But it's better that you focus on what we explain. Remember, we are busy with homeostasis, maintaining a constant internal balance. That is what we're busy with. And what we're looking now is for whatever factor, doesn't matter. We're still busy with a general idea. Colin will explain to you if there's an imbalance, if things are not what it should be. And if it's too much, in other words, it rises above the normal, or it's too low, it drops below the normal. Colin, what happens?
Right. The moment, now optimal, once again, optimal stands for the most favorable. And so the optimal environment there is there when an imbalance must be detected. And the moment it is detected, there is a control center. And I want you to maybe those steps are very important to understand all the other issues that we're going to deal with later on. So first of all, the imbalance here in this case is something is above normal. This level here, it is above normal, and a message is then sent to a control
For example,
center.
there's too much carbon dioxide in your blood because you don't breathe fast enough or not deep enough. And then it's picked up, and a message is sent to the control center, which is your breathing center. What happens then?
Right, something must happen to let you, for instance, as you said, to breathe faster so that you can get rid of your carbon dioxide. But we'll get to that one later on.
Yeah, we will explain it
Yeah.
in detail, but just to give them an idea of what we're busy with.
So instruction is sent to the target organ, and a target organ is that organ that has an effect. It's also referred to as the effector, so that the target, the corrective action can be made so that everything can return to normal and the balance must be restored. And exactly the same happens when something drops before normal. Imbalance is detected, message is sent to the control center, corrective or instruction is sent, corrective measure is carried out, and everything returns to normal and the balance is restored. So everything is about maintaining the balance. Keep that in mind.
Right. Let's see once again. Because why is it called a negative feedback? Because the concentration or the conditions in a system will control the conditions in a system. How does that sound? Too much, do things to drop. Too little, do things to rise. So that there is always a median, a middle. Not too much, not too little, not too high, not too low, just right. Good. Let's see about the steps.
Right. First of all, as we've said, an imbalance is detected. That message is sent to the control center. The control center needs to respond so that the instruction must be sent to the target organ or that effector that needs to respond and carry out that corrective action so that it opposes or reverses the imbalance and so that balance is restored. 7 steps. And those 7 steps is very important because that is going to make it easy for you to understand and also to understand all of these that we must do. So let's start with the first one, Lorraine.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate what you just said. Those 7 steps, if you can remember them, and they are in the notes, or you can go back to the PowerPoint. Your teacher can help you to access that. And any of the homeostatic processes you can fit into those 7 steps. The first one that we're going to look at should be familiar to you, and that is the control of the blood sugar, which is, of course, the concentration of glucose in the blood. Now, it is very important that the glucose levels are normal, because too much glucose in the blood can lead to clotting of blood. It can lead to blood vessels not working properly. It can lead to blindness. That's usually what somebody has when they have diabetes mellitus, is too much glucose in the blood. And also the cells can't absorb the glucose. Too little glucose, you don't have enough glucose for enough energy. You can actually die from a too low blood glucose level. Now, there's a very important organ involved in the control of blood sugar levels, Colin.
Yes, and this is the pancreas here. Now, the pancreas contains different cells, and it's involved in digestion, but we're looking at the blood sugar levels, and those cells are those little islets of Langerhans. And those islets of Langerhans, they contain 2 different types of cells. Now, you see, they secrete hormones, and hormones is secreted directly into the bloodstream, and that is why it's also referred to, these cells are endocrine cells.
Yes, can I just make a little note so that they can see? If we look at the pancreas, they always say it's a tongue-shaped structure. And we have the normal pancreatic cells with little tubes and ducts that go, looks as if I'm drawing a leaf. And these cells will produce enzymes, and it will go with a little tube to the duodenum. You know that. But all over in the pancreas, we have these little groups of cells called, as Colin has said, the islets of Langerhans. Now, an islet is a small island. There is Mr. Langerhans' little islets. And they've got two types of cells, alpha cells and beta cells. Alpha cells secretes a hormone with the name of glucagon. Now be careful. We've done glucose, glucagon. And beta cells secrete the hormone insulin. And this is where the problem is with somebody suffering from diabetes. Glucagon will increase the blood sugar. Insulin will decrease it, and Colin will explain to you exactly how it happens.
Yes, so let's look at this little slide here. What happens when the blood sugar rises above normal? Once again, we come back to what we've started off. And here we go. When something is either too high or too low, or above normal or below normal. So here we have the pancreas. And if the blood sugar rises above normal, the pancreas will be stimulated. First of all, the imbalance must be detected. We're going back to the 7 steps. And a message is sent to the control center, which is the pancreas here. And the pancreas will secrete the hormone insulin directly into the bloodstream. And insulin must now go to the target organs. And that target organ or the effector is the liver and also the muscle cells in the body. And because the glucose now, the blood sugar, which is glucose, is too much, glucose, which are single molecules and can be easily absorbed by the bloodstream, must now be converted into a form that is not easily absorbed by the bloodstream, and that is glucose is now converted into glycogen. And now I'm also going to say, be careful, because now we heard about glucagon, we have glucose, and we have glycogen. And you can easily get confused with the 3. Glucose is sugar. Sugar must be converted, and we know sugar is converted into glycogen. That you have learned as from grade 10 already, maybe earlier. So glycogen is then stored in the liver as well as in the muscle cells of the body in that form, and the glucose level will now drop from being too high to normal.
Yeah, in other words, with insulin, is that glucose will turn into or be converted into glycogen. A single glucose and another glucose and another glucose will be connected now. Now you can see it's a polymer, and it can be stored apart in the muscles and in the liver. And should the need for sugar arise, should your blood sugar levels, in other words, your glucose levels, drop too low, the secretion of insulin will inhibit it, and the the pancreas will secrete glucagon so that the glycogen that was stored in the liver and in the muscle cells can be turned back into glucose, the single molecules. Because glucose is used for cellular respiration. So it's when you need energy and there isn't enough glucose in your blood. This conversion back into glucose will occur. And everything is controlled by receptors sensitive for blood sugar levels, and that will send a message to the pancreas to now start secreting insulin, stop glucagon, or inhibit glucagon and secrete insulin.
And that is actually what negative feedback is where the secretion of one hormone will either it will inhibit or it will secrete more of a kind, and vice versa. Let's just look at the last, whatever you've said, so that we can have this visual one.
Yes.
What perhaps when the blood sugar level drops below normal. So once again, that is detected, a message is being sent to the target organ, the pancreas. The pancreas will secrete the alpha cells, of course, in the islets of Langerhans will secrete glucagon. Glucagon knows now where that storage of glucose is, just in a form, and that is glycogen. So it stimulates the breakdown of glycogen back into glucose, and the blood sugar level is increased. And this is then the negative feedback between insulin and glucagon with the blood sugar control. And this is when this is happening in a normal person's body, not when somebody is suffering from diabetes. This is the whole one that we've showed you just now, the two, that you can see. They can give it to you in any form, and you must detect. They will, of course, give you some numbers and labels so that you can fill out and fill in what is happening. Let's give you this little bit of challenge, and I hope there's enough people that is linked onto the system so that we can see.
Yeah, and this is now what we call a flow diagram. And sometimes you're required to draw a flow diagram or to fill in labels or processes in a flow diagram. So it's excellent, Colin, that you have this here, and let's go around it step by step.
Right, there's numbered number 1 to number 6. Let's start with number 1.
First start with
And
in the
we
middle.
almost start where there's a normal range.
Yes.
So when there's a normal range, let's go, and the glucose level increases. Of course, this is detected, the imbalance. Then the target organ, the pancreas, must release which hormone. So now we must know when the glucose level is too high, which hormone will play a role. And let's see, insulin is secreted. Where does this insulin go to? To the target organs, the liver and the muscles. And what does insulin do? What is the functioning of insulin? To convert glucose into glycogen.
Yes.
So what is the role of insulin? In fact, it is to lower the blood sugar level. And that is why people who suffer from diabetes mellitus, they normally are given insulin to lower the blood sugar level because their bodies don't have that ability to do that.
That's why they know that people usually talk about auntie or uncle so-and-so has sugar. It means that they've got diabetes mellitus, too much sugar or glucose in the blood. What happens then when the glucose is converted into glycogen?
Right, and what happens to the glucose level? Of course, it drops or decreases, and the normal glucose level is reached again. Then, as you undergo cellular respiration, your body needs the available glucose in the body and uses it up. And what happens? The glucose level drops or decreases. What happens now? And somehow, what is the target organ? The pancreas. And the pancreas must release glucagon. Glucagon knows there is stored glucose just in the form of glycogen. Where is that? In the liver and the muscles. And the glycogen is converted then back to glucose. And glucose will be added to the blood, and the glucose level increases back to normal. And this is a negative feedback mechanism. When something is too high, it will come or drop until it is normal. And when something is too low, it will be increased until it is back to normal.
And that means that our learners this year in grade 11 already, as well as next year in grade 12, can be asked to explain how the blood sugar level or the blood glucose level is controlled. And then they need to explain the role of the pancreas, the role of glucagon, as well as insulin. And this diagram, as you have just seen it, and there it is again, this diagram or the explanation of it can count up to 10 plus marks.
Mm-hmm.
For our
It can even
learners.
be an essay.
It
Part
can
of an
even
essay
be an
also.
essay if
Yes.
it's slightly expanded and they ask you to explain what diabetes mellitus is, etc. So, yes. Now, what do questions look like? Colin, you've got one here that is about different persons taking in different liquids.
Yeah, you can see this is actually a graph that has been taken out of a book of 2001 already.
Yes.
So quite a long time ago, which shows you that nothing has changed since then, because this is scientific knowledge. So it shows you a graph that shows the blood glucose concentration in a normal person. Can you see? They tell you exactly what to look at, and when you look at a question, you must underline those very important key words. It's a normal person, and the other person is a person with diabetes mellitus.
And look at the two graphs. They indicate which graph is that of a person or a normal person and which one is the graph of a person with diabetes mellitus. And we'll explain more about diabetes mellitus. There's a question from Kama High School in the Eastern Cape, so we'll say something more. Let's just focus on the question now.
Right, they say both persons ingested 100 milliliters of glucose solution at 30 minutes. So here they were given a glucose solution, and look what happens. The normal person, you can see immediately for the next 15 minutes the blood glucose level increased, and for the next 15 minutes it almost returned to normal, and after 30 minutes it was back to normal again. Here you can see, look at the increase of a person who suffers from diabetes mellitus.
Yeah, the blood glucose level is higher anyway to start with.
And that is what you must pay attention to. Nobody's going to tell you that, but those are the things that you need to, that you need to pay attention to. And you have to read, and the first question there is, what is the blood glucose concentration? They give it to you, the unit, in grams per cubic centimeter of the person with diabetes mellitus at 90 minutes. And this is a very simple question. At 90 minutes, you can't look at the normal person because the question refers to the person with diabetes, and you read from the graph. So what is your answer? Your answer is 0.25. Look at where is the little tick. Why is it not together with the grams per cubic centimeter? Because it is part of the question. But always give your units as part of your answer so that the examiners
Very
must know.
important, yeah.
So that they know you know exactly how to read from a graph.
And we both mark matric end of year papers. So when we give you these tips, remember them, store them in the back of your heads. Yes. Next question. Let's see. How many minutes after the ingestion of glucose did the glucose concentration reach its highest level in the normal person? Now, they ingested the glucose at 30 minutes. The highest level is there that you can see just off, it's almost 1.125, almost there. But it's immediately after the glucose concentration was ingested, from 30 to 45. In other words, 15 minutes after ingestion. Remember, ingestion is to take in. There's another one. Describe two differences in the pattern of the blood glucose concentration for the person with diabetes mellitus and a normal person. Now, grade 11s. I actually had a discussion with my grade 11s today, and I told them that they must be able to describe the pattern or the trend of a graph. And you can't just say it goes up. You must use the minutes on the x-axis and explain very well. So you can say that after the glucose solution was ingested, the blood sugar level of a person with diabetes mellitus is higher than the person with normal blood sugar levels. It is higher at all times, for starters, right from the beginning. You get 2 marks. You get one for the higher as well as one for the at all times. Because if you look at the graph, the diabetes person is always higher. Then the next thing that you can say, Colin, bring up the bullet, is that with a person with diabetes mellitus, the increase in the blood glucose level is much more or a greater increase after ingestion than in a person with normal blood sugar levels. And the third thing that you can say is that it takes longer for the blood glucose level in the person with diabetes mellitus to stabilize. Can you see at the end, at 120 minutes, 2 hours, it's not back yet where it was before ingesting. While with a person with a normal blood sugar levels, it's been back almost after 70, how many minutes? 75 minutes. So can you see how you have to explain a trend or a pattern?
Can I just also come in here before we go any further? When they say, you can see there are 3 answers here. For life sciences, if they ask you to describe, you can see there will always be 2 marks. So you can't just name something and not give a reason for it. The other thing is, if they ask you to give 2 differences, you only give 2. So if you would write any 3, and for instance, that first one was incorrect, we would mark the second one as, and it's correct. And the third one is correct, but we won't mark it. Why not? Because you have given 2 at the top, and the question was, you only have to give 2 answers.
Remember, here we've given 3 possibilities,
yes,
because there are more than 2 possibilities, but you only need to give 2. And she said describe, explain, anything. You have to say why. Please, why? Also with an adaptation, there's always a reason. Colin, let's continue. They need to explain the reason for the differences. What do you say?
And there it is. Because a person with diabetes mellitus, they do not produce insulin, or they are, when they can become insulin resistant.
Right, can I just answer our learner from Karma Secondary? What is diabetes mellitus? It is when you do not have insulin, or you do not have enough insulin, so your blood sugar or your blood glucose levels cannot be controlled. It means that you will have too much glucose in the blood and not enough in the cells for cellular respiration. It can lead to kidney failure. It can lead to blindness. It can lead you to have limbs or parts of limbs amputated because the blood flow is not normal. There is simply too much glucose. That is a very short sort of garden variety explanation. You need to go and look in your textbook to see exactly what diabetes mellitus is. The name diabetes mellitus means the passing of honey-sweet urine. Under normal conditions, there is no sugar in the urine except when you are diabetic. In the old days, how did they used to test for diabetes? They didn't have any test strips, so they honey-sweet urine.
I don't know,
Next
we
one.
can't really see what the messages is there. We can just maybe
I'll
click
tell
on
you
them.
what the message is.
Are we speaking, the ladies, are we speaking to...
Yeah. No,
Okay.
this is just somebody from Matthew Goniwe saying hello, and then somebody asked us what the pancreas is. It's a gland secreting the insulin and
Right at
the
the bottom.
glucagon.
Second from...
And then the Makatsu just said hello, and then somebody asked, if you write one sentence with 2 hints of each sentence, how will the marks be allocated? This is a good answer, a good question, which means, Colin, could we quickly go back, because I know what this person means. In other words, can I just... No.
Okay.
Can I just have the... Sorry. In other words, if you write that part, in other words, only... Where is it now? There you are. If you only write that first part, and you only write that first part, you don't write the second part of the sentence. Now, if you had to give 2 differences, it would have counted 4 marks, because you had to explain that reason with its 2 marks, that reason with its 2 marks. Now, because you only explained half, you will only get half the marks for the first part, but because you don't have the second part, you simply won't get marks. And that was the question. Good question. We hope you've got it now. Over to you.
Yes, now we get to the homeostasis, the homeostatic control of the carbon dioxide in blood. during breathing. Now, the question is, why is it that we say the control of the carbon dioxide levels and not the oxygen levels? Because oxygen, you have oxygen and you need oxygen, but you don't need too much carbon dioxide in your blood. Because carbon dioxide has quite a few effects on the body, and this is not that you have to know this, but so that you know. If there is an increase in the carbon dioxide, it can lead to drowsiness, dizziness, headache, confusion. Your sight will be affected. You will be able, it's reduced hearing. You will have a shortness of breath and sweating, increased heart rate, tremors, and muscular tremors, and so on.
And eventually you'll die.
Eventually you will die if the carbon dioxide increase or levels will increase in the
Because
body.
remember, too much carbon dioxide means too little oxygen. Because that's really what it comes down to. And if you don't have enough oxygen, you don't have enough energy from cellular respiration, and your brain is the first that will suffer from that. Now, if we look at that slide, and never are you allowed to use the equal sign, I only see that now, but what happens? What is the trigger? How does our bodies know that there is too much carbon dioxide? Carbon dioxide, when it dissolves in water, forms a weak acid, and this reaction can occur backwards as well. Carbonic acid. Soda water that we use in cool drink is carbon dioxide dissolved in water, right? And then it will break up, for those of you who take chemistry, and it will break up this carbonic acid into the hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions. And this is what makes your blood acidic with a low pH. And the low pH will be picked up by the chemoreceptors in your carotid artery, here in your neck, and the aorta. And then, Colin, it is all action to return the situation to normal. What will happen then?
Yes, first of all, there is a control center, and we need to say that the control center for breathing is the medulla oblongata in the brain. So that is where the respiratory center, but also heartbeat, is also controlled by the medulla oblongata, and both actually go hand in hand when we look at the carbon dioxide levels in our blood. So the receptors that are sensitive for too much carbon dioxide in our body is in this aortic arc that goes there, because when blood comes from the heart, is pumped from the blood through the aortic arc, it must go to the rest of the body cells. And if that blood contains too much carbon dioxide, there's too much carbon dioxide going to the body cells, and that is not good for the body.
And apart from that, sorry, when I said that it lowers the pH, remember it's not just the trigger so that we have to breathe. The low pH, the too much carbon dioxide that Colin was talking about, proteins in our body are very pH specific, and it's only the enzymes in our stomach that likes an acidic pH. The rest of the proteins in our body do not. So blood that is too acidic, too low pH is not good.
Right, you have explained that whole story about when carbon dioxide and water forms carbonic acid. It breaks down, and you already expressed that would cause a decrease in the pH level. But it is that decrease in the pH level that actually causes an increase in the breathing rate. So why is it important that the breathing rate must increase? Can you see? And because as blood goes to the brain, I've said earlier on, we have the aortic arc, blood must go to the body, and we get the carotid artery, blood must go to the brain to provide oxygen. And if that blood contains too much carbon dioxide, these are the receptors in these centers that will detect it and will send that message to the medulla oblongata that will start reacting to send impulses to the muscles that control breathing, the intercostal muscles and the diaphragm. That can you see that muscle plate that runs across the body that attaches, the lungs are actually attached to it there, and they will start contracting severely. Also, the heart will be stimulated or pump faster to increase the blood flow. So breathing is increased, the blood flow to send oxygen to the body cells where there is a deficiency of oxygen. Blood will go faster to the body cells. Carbon dioxide will be removed from the body cells faster, and the increased breathing, then more oxygen will be breathed in, but more carbon dioxide will leave the body. And this is how the pH, or rather the balance of the carbon dioxide levels, will be controlled.
And remember, it's not only that you breathe faster, you'll also breathe deeper. You'll take deeper breaths in order to restore the balance of carbon dioxide and oxygen. But it's so interesting that it's actually the too much carbon dioxide that is the trigger, because too much carbon dioxide has this chemical reaction that we explained earlier. And too much carbon dioxide also means too little oxygen. So it's actually in order to stabilize the oxygen levels that the carbon dioxide serves as this trigger.
And questions on this can be easily asked. It's something like, what happens when you have or when you exercise excessively? What happens with the breathing rate? Because you can only start breathing faster, and you can feel that in your muscles, and especially the ones in your legs, when the lactic acid, they start accumulating there, that the breathing rate will start increasing. So let's see if we have a little
there's
exercise
a question.
there. There's a question. It's very simple questions. This one is a simple question. It's about the concentration of carbon dioxide in a person's veins. Remember, we have blood vessels, and we have veins, and we have arteries. But in the veins, as exercise levels increase, then the person in the investigation was asked to ride a bicycle which generated electricity measured in watts. And the faster the person cycled, the more watts he generated. And then they asked, what is the normal carbon dioxide concentration in the venous blood for this person, which means it's in blood of the veins. There you can see. Now, the answer here is 0.50. What did I say earlier on? Then when you do answer, you have to give the unit as well. Depending on the examiners, they can ask you 1, or we can give 2 marks allocated to that. And so they ask also, explain the significance of measuring the carbon dioxide in the blood when the person is not doing it. It's like having a control. We have to establish that baseline. What is the minimum carbon dioxide in the blood, or so that we can compare the results that we get. So also, as I've said, it can act as a control so that we can determine if those results are caused by the exercise, which is the independent variable.
It in other words increases actually both the reliability and the validity of this investigation. Okay, Colin, we have a little time left. Shall we just quickly look at how water levels in our environment is controlled?
Yeah. We can actually do both with the water and the salt, because
Yeah.
both are
The
with
two
your
go
excretion.
together.
Yes. But let's see the control of the water levels in the internal environment. Now, when you have a high salt intake, salt is immediately absorbed by your intestines. It's absorbed by the gut into the bloodstream. And what happens now? The blood water content drops because of the high salt content. The receptors are stimulated. This is your hypophysis, or the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland will secrete a hormone called ADH. Now, you don't have to know what the whole hormone stands, the name of the hormone. It is, if you're interested, the anti-deuterative hormone, and it is secreted straight and directly into the bloodstream. And where does it go to? It needs to go to the target organ, which is the kidney. And in the kidney, we have very small tubules, and when it reaches it, it will make it more permeable, so that water will be saved and before it leaves with the urine or released with the urine, so more water is stored and saved by the body, less will be secreted with the urine or excreted rather, and the blood water content increases to normal.
Can you see how carefully this concentration is controlled? In other words, it's not simply water that is kept back. It is because of the control center in the hypophysis, or as Colin said, you can also use the name pituitary gland. Let's have a look at a picture explaining that.
Now we see the whole body as such, because the previous is a diagram that you can be given, and then you must know what's going on. Here
the previous one, there was too much salt. Now there's too much water. So what happens?
Right. If there's too much water in the blood, what happens? The hypothalamus detects that there's an imbalance. What is the imbalance? Too much water. And the hypothalamus sends a message to the pituitary gland, and less ADH is then released. And less water will be absorbed in the kidney tubule, and more water will then be released through urine from the kidneys.
Sometimes if you look at the color of urine, you will see that it's darker yellow or lighter yellow, so to speak. And that is darker yellow. Darker yellow is a more concentrated urine, lighter yellow a less concentrated, and it also depends on how much substances you took in, maybe the bile pigments, etc. The kidneys also play a role with the water contents as far as temperature is concerned. We know that we lose more water on a warm day. So, Gordon, let's quickly, just for interest's sake, listen. We will do this in more detail next year. But, yes, we are busy with the control of water.
Right. On a warm day, what happens on a warm day? You sweat more. So the water content decreases. And it's the hypothalamus that is stimulates the pituitary gland to secrete more ADH. Now you can hear there's a lot of terminology involved and a lot of glands and organs that you must know. What does ADH do? ADH will go with the bloodstream to the kidneys. In the kidneys, you have those very small tubules, and they form the collecting ducts. Now, the collecting duct can either become more permeable when there's more ADH that is secreted.
And that permeable means water moves out of the duct into the bloodstream. In other words, it's kept back.
Yes. So when it is, then more water will be reabsorbed from the tubules back into the blood. As Lorraine said just now, the urine becomes more concentrated and the volume decreases. In simple words, the color of your urine is then darker and there is less urine. The volume decreases.
Because there's less water.
Because it's a warm day, and that is why there's less urine.
Yeah.
And then your thirst center in your brain is stimulated, you drink water, and the water balance then returns to normal.
And I hope, Anele from Matthew Gr11, that answers your question. But let's have a look to end off with what happens on a cold day, when we don't sweat as much.
Now remember, when on a warm day, more ADH was secreted. So what will happen on a cold day? Less ADH will be secreted. What does ADH do? ADH is responsible for the permeability of the collecting ducts.
In other words, so that we can keep back water.
Yes. So now on a cold day, you know what happens. You visit that other place more often. Why? Because the walls of the distal convoluted tubules as well as the collecting ducts become less permeable. That means more water will go through the tubules, and then the urine becomes less concentrated, which means it is not as dark in color, it's very diluted, and the volume increases, which means there's more urine. You see, there's nothing wrong with taking whatever is given to you and put it into very simple words as long as it remains scientific. And then more urine will be excreted, the water content decreases, and it will return to normal. there you have, they can give you any type of question to end of this. You can see
Yeah,
there
let's just
is a
do this
negative
question.
feedback response, and there you have the hormone X target organ response, and they want to know what is hormone X.
Remember, this is now
Because the question, it
about
says,
the blood, water, and the too little water in the blood.
and they give you all the information. They tell you this happens when a person is dehydrated. So you must know simple words like dehydrated means there is not enough water in the body. And if there's not enough water in the body, the hormone then will be, of course, ADH. the
You don't have to know the
antidiuretic,
name
yeah.
antidiuretic hormone,
But-
but ADH is fine.
Yes. And then they want to know the endocrine gland that secretes ADH. It is there, the hypothalamus, or it also stimulates the pituitary gland then, and the target organ will be the kidneys. As simple as that.
Okay. And Colin, won't you give me that email address? I'm going to put it up. We've had a few questions. If you couldn't write down because we said you shouldn't, your teacher can contact. It will be on the portal tomorrow, this PowerPoint. And if you cannot get it, if there is a problem, let your teacher contact this email so that you can be helped to obtain all the necessary information. And I think this is it for today.
Yes. So they can go back and they can and please keep all these notes of yours. You will definitely need it for grade 12 next year, because it will be part of your paper 1 for grade 12 next year. So yes, the June exams is on hand, and
Good luck.
Yeah,
Study hard.
please.
Do your best. Until we see you again later in the year, keep well.